There is a quiet contradiction in many human lives. We long for love. We search for it in conversations, in memories, in hopes we rarely speak aloud. We tell ourselves that if we were truly loved, something inside us would finally settle. And yet, when love actually arrives, real love, patient love, gentle love, something unexpected can happen. Instead of peace, we feel tension. Instead of relief, we feel exposed. Instead of safety, we feel strangely unsettled. We may question the person in front of us. We may become suspicious of kindness. We may withdraw when someone moves closer. And sometimes we sabotage the very thing we once prayed for. At first, this makes no sense. Why would anyone fear what they deeply desire? The answer often has little to do with love itself. It has to do with what love touches. Because love does not only awaken our longing, it also awakens our history. And that is where the deeper story begins. Most people think fear appears only in the presence of danger, but the human mind is more complicated than that. Sometimes, fear appears in the presence of possibility. Sometimes the most frightening thing is not pain. It is tenderness. Not because tenderness harms us, but because tenderness can reach places inside us that pain never could. Pain, in a strange way, can become familiar. Disappointment can become predictable. Distance can become normal. And what becomes normal begins to feel safe, even when it hurts. Many people were not taught love as safety. They were taught love as uncertainty, love that could disappear, love that had to be earned, love that arrived with criticism, love that depended on performance, love that could be withdrawn at the slightest mistake. When this is the emotional climate of early life, the soul learns something very powerful. It learns not simply how to survive, it learns what to expect. And what we expect often shapes what we trust. So when a person enters our life and offers genuine care that is patient, stable, present, something deep inside may not recognize it as safety. It may recognize it as unfamiliar. And what is unfamiliar can feel threatening. That is one of the great paradoxes of human nature. We often do not run from what hurts us. We run from what exposes the fact that we have been hurt. Love has a way of doing that. It reveals the hidden architecture of our defenses. Most people do not consciously choose their defenses. They build them quietly over years. A little distance here, a little silence there, a habit of overthinking, a need to stay in control, a tendency to leave first, a reluctance to need anyone too deeply. At first, these are not personality traits. They are survival strategies. The child who was ignored learns not to ask for too much. The child who was criticized learns perfection. The child who was abandoned learns self-protection. The child who was loved inconsistently learns vigilance. Years later, these strategies still remain. Only now, they are hidden beneath adult language. I just need space. I don't trust easily. I don't want to depend on anyone. I'm fine on my own. And perhaps sometimes these statements are true, but sometimes they are disguises. Because the deepest fear is not always rejection. Sometimes the deepest fear is being truly received. To be loved is not only to be comforted, it is also to be seen. And being seen can feel dangerous, not because the other person is dangerous, but because visibility threatens everything we built to stay hidden. If someone sees our fear, what then? If someone sees the loneliness we buried, what then? If someone sees how deeply we want love, what then? Many people can tolerate being misunderstood, but being understood can be terrifying. Because once someone sees through the armor, we can no longer pretend the armor is who we are. And that can feel like standing at the edge of a psychological cliff. So what happens? A person gets close, and suddenly the mind becomes louder. You begin to doubt their intentions. You analyze every message. You look for changes in tone. You search for signs of withdrawal. You prepare for disappointment before it arrives. Outwardly, it looks like mistrust, but inwardly, it is often memory. Not memory as a clear story, memory as an emotional atmosphere, a feeling that says, do not relax, do not lean in too far, do not believe this will last. That voice may not sound dramatic. Often it sounds reasonable. That is what makes it powerful. Fear rarely introduces itself as fear. It often appears as logic, and so we obey it. We keep a little distance. We hold back a little truth. We make ourselves a little less reachable. And then, when the relationship begins to weaken, part of us says, I knew it. But what we call intuition is not always wisdom. Sometimes it is old pain predicting the future. There is another layer to this. Love does not only awaken fear of loss, it can awaken grief. Real love can quietly reveal how long we have lived without it. A patient person may reveal how much chaos we normalized. A kind person may reveal how harshly we speak to ourselves. A trustworthy person may reveal how deeply betrayal shaped us. And that realization can be painful, not because love hurts, but because love shines light on old darkness. Sometimes a person does not pull away because love feels wrong. They pull away because love makes them aware of what has been missing for years. And grief often hides beneath resistance. This is why some people become strangely restless in healthy relationships. Nothing is wrong. And yet, something inside feels unsettled because there is no familiar chaos to manage, no emotional puzzle to solve, no constant need to prove worth, and without that drama, an old identity begins to tremble. For some people, struggle became identity, being the one who holds everything together, being the one who expects little, being the one who needs no one. But love quietly challenges those identities. Love asks, what if you do not have to earn this? What if you do not have to stay guarded? What if you are allowed to rest? And rest can feel frightening to a nervous system trained for survival. People often think healing means becoming fearless. It does not. Healing often begins with recognizing what our fear has been protecting. There is wisdom in defenses. Even painful defenses once served a purpose. They helped us survive moments we did not know how to survive. So, the goal is not to hate them. The goal is to understand them. To say, perhaps for the first time, I know why I learned this. I know why closeness feels dangerous. I know why tenderness makes me uneasy. And understanding changes something, because what remains unconscious controls us, but what becomes conscious can be held differently. A loving message arrives and anxiety rises. Someone offers reassurance, and part of us doubts it. Someone stays, and suddenly we want to run. Instead of obeying the old impulse immediately, we pause, not to suppress it, but to observe it. And in that moment, something profound begins. For perhaps the first time, we realize this fear may be old. This fear may not belong entirely to this moment. This fear may be speaking from another time. That realization creates space, and space is where freedom begins. Love becomes safer not when we find a perfect person, but when we begin to understand the parts of ourselves that expect abandonment, criticism, or loss. This is difficult work because it requires honesty. It requires asking questions many people spend years avoiding. Why does kindness make me suspicious? Why do I trust inconsistency more than steadiness? Why does closeness make me want distance? Why do I feel safer when I am less known? Almost everyone wants love, but very few people realize that love asks more of us than desire. It asks surrender. Not surrender to another person, surrender of old certainties, surrender of familiar defenses, surrender of the stories we built around why we must stay guarded. That is why love can feel like loss before it feels like home. A loss of control, a loss of old identity, a loss of the protective distance we once believed we needed. And yet, on the other side of that loss, something extraordinary can happen. We begin to experience a different kind of safety. Not the safety of walls, the safety of presence. Not the safety of emotional distance, the safety of not having to hide. That kind of safety does not mean we never feel fear. It means fear is no longer the one making every decision. There is a quiet maturity in being able to say, part of me is afraid, and part of me still wants to stay. That is not weakness, that is integration. It is one thing to be fearless when nothing matters. It is another thing entirely to remain open when something does. And perhaps that is the real work of love, not finding someone who never triggers our wounds, but becoming conscious enough to know when our wounds are speaking. Because the person in front of us may not be the one we are reacting to. Sometimes we are reacting to echoes of old silences, old disappointments, old absences. And when we understand that, we stop turning every present moment into a repetition of the past. Little by little, trust becomes possible, not because uncertainty disappears, but because we stop needing certainty to remain open. And maybe that is what emotional safety really is. Not the promise that we will never be hurt, but the inner strength to stay present without abandoning ourselves. That kind of love feels different. It does not rush, it does not demand masks, it does not require us to become smaller to keep it. And perhaps, at first, it will still feel unfamiliar. But unfamiliar does not mean wrong. Sometimes, unfamiliar is simply what healing feels like. So if being loved has ever made you uneasy, restless, or afraid, it does not necessarily mean you are incapable of love. It may mean love has reached a place inside you that has been guarded for a very long time, a place that learned survival before it learned safety, a place that still expects the door to close. And perhaps the deepest transformation is not forcing that part to disappear. It is meeting it with understanding, listening to it, and gently teaching it something new. And maybe, slowly, almost quietly, the heart learns a new language, not the language of defense, but the language of trust. Not the certainty that love will never hurt, but the courage to remain open anyway. Because in the end, perhaps the greatest fear was never love itself. It was the possibility that love might ask us to become fully visible. And the deepest healing may be this, to discover that when we are finally seen, we do not disappear. we begin.